Hi there again, it's me. I'm a bit more chipper as not only have I found a lead on perhaps the cylinders, but I found someone who's almost as interested in this whole mystery as I am.
Well, everyone loves a mystery.
Okay, everyone, let me introduce you to Phil, who is joining me from England. Maybe you'd be better.
Okay. Hello there, old recording enthusiasts and French culture lovers and opera lovers. And who exactly is this podcast for?
Well, at this point, it's mainly for me. I haven't heard from anyone who is actually listening to it.
Okay, then, let me start again. Hello there, I'm Dr. Phil Donan. I have an MA in Victorian Literature and a PhD in 19th century French history. So this is all really up my street.
And you work for the University of Glenelg, is that right?
Well, I did until very recently, right enough. And now I'm a freelance researcher, which is how I've got time to dabble in playing detective.
I found Phil through my search for a pianola.
Voilà, Alicia et Hakim disaient alors les dieux.
Allô, tu fais quoi ça?
Je cherche.
Ah ok, je savais pas.
En anglais, s'il te plaît.
Montre-moi. Yes, that's definitely a piano roll.
C'est un peu étrange, n'est-ce pas, to find a piano roll with gramophone recordings?
I suppose. It really depends on what's on the roll. Is it not in the catalogue?
No, it's not.
Oh, well, you had better find a pianola to play it on.
How do I do that?
Do you often record your colleagues at work?
Alicia doesn't mind, and Hakim's sort of a show-off.
And are you sure they know they're going to be on this podcast?
And once Phil and I had been introduced, we were able to find someone with a player piano in Paris, who I lent the piano roll to, and he made a lovely recording for us.
Well, lovely isn't really the right word, is it? I mean, really.
I guess you're right.
But, and I don't want anyone to have the impression that I was really responsible for finding the pianola. That was Monsieur Xavier. I wouldn't want anyone to think.
Oh, yes, of course, but you were the one who identified the seal.
Well, yes.
Let me give you all a little bit of history. Not much, I promise.
Oh, and what's wrong with a little bit of history?
Gramophone recordings of the kind in the urn, the official ones, were similar to Red Seal recordings released by Victor. They were prestige recordings. They were highbrow music like opera. And the piano roll, in its casing, was sealed in red wax in a similar way. However, underneath the seal was a slip of paper. Phil figured out what that was.
It's a chit, like a receipt, saying that the person who signed it is an abonné. And not only that, but one who's got a box 3 times a week.
Hang on, Phil, what is that? What's an abonné?
Well, it's like an opera patron, someone who subscribes, like a season ticket holder.
And it was signed?
De Chagny. I think it would be unlikely, given the time period, to be anyone other than Philippe, Count de Chagny, a French aristocrat and a known opera lover.
So we don't want to jump to any conclusions.
Well, this scrap of paper could be just that, a scrap of paper.
But equally, it's just possible that it could belong to the inventor on the Volta cylinders, because Phil was aware of a phonograph recording.
I had been dimly aware there was a phonograph recording of Count Philippe.
It's in a cylinder archive based in California. It's an Edison phonograph recording from 1879 or so.
But I'd never actually heard it myself.
And Count Philippe could be our man, because he was wealthy and a patron of the arts. His younger brother married an opera singer, didn't he?
He did. There's that connection.
And he mysteriously vanished, didn't he?
Yes, that's true. Although I don't know if realistically we can say that has anything to do with the piano roll or the Volta cylinders.
And the piano roll, we've listened to it a couple times now, and agree that it's
impressive, bearing in mind that some composers of the early 1900s composed specifically for the piano roll, creating pieces that were too complex for ordinary human players.
So we'll just pause a moment to play it for you, and then we're going to have a listen to the Count Philippe phonograph from 1879, the digitized file which the Continuous Wave Foundation in California has kindly lent us. So have a listen. Strange and kind of beautiful, isn't it?
And possibly Count Philippe's composition or connected to him in some way.
As you can tell, Phil and I are pretty excited to listen to the Edison phonograph recording and to find out whether Count Philippe's voice is one of the ones heard on the Volta cylinders and the urns in the Palais Garnier time capsules.
Should you play the cleaned up version of that first cylinder?
But they would have already heard it. It's on the website.
Well, you can't assume that they would.
Okay, you're right.
And you said you had to hand crank this to get it to play.
It would have all been hand cranked, so the speed would have been variable. And you would have listened to it through, like, rubber listening tubes.
Tubes?
Yeah, kind of like earbuds.
Oh, all right. Should we let them hear it now, then?
Yeah, of course.
You are wasting my time.
You are a guest in my home, and so I entertain you. You will have to stand much closer to the apparatus, like this. You must speak very loudly into it. Come.
What is the point of this contraption?
You didn't react this way to the telegraph. I thought you had a belief in the workings of progress.
The telegraph came a long time ago. We were younger men.
You really must speak loudly into the horn.
And you invented all this, did you?
Naturally.
I read the newspapers. I know Thomas Edison.
A trifle. This is a design and improvement to my own specifications. Believe me when I play it back.
So that's our mysterious cylinders for comparison purposes.
With the verified Count Philippe phonograph from 1879.
All right.
So, here goes.
Je suis Philippe, comte de Jagny. Ceci est mon phonographe, qui sème le vent, récolte la tempête.
Well, that's pretty clearly not...
Even by the standards of the tinfoil phonograph, which you said was pretty primitive.
It's not Dude A. Unfortunately, that didn't really turn out like we expected it to, and I felt just so embarrassed because I had gotten Phil interested in it, and well, Phil seems to be a more practical type all around, and he suggested, instead of feeling bad about the dead end, I should leave it alone for a while and try investigating other leads. And I did think about it, and I wasn't really sure what there was in terms of leads. But as it happens, Monsieur Xavier, the piano roll collector, actually had a bit of a connection with Palais Garnier.
So, Monsieur Xavier, who had only spoken to before on the phone, agreed to meet me here in Butte Chaumont to talk about an intriguing story. Bonjour!
Bonjour.
So, Monsieur Xavier, before we met up, told me a lot about the history of the player piano. I had no idea the repertoire was so vast, or that so many of these things had been manufactured, millions of them, tens of thousands of piano roll titles. And it wasn't just serious classical music or opera. The whole range of pieces for piano were reproduced in rolls. You can even buy modern player piano rolls, like I've heard Bohemian Rhapsody played on player piano. Imagine that on player piano. Anyway, Monsieur Xavier was the first to admit to me that his tastes were a little eccentric, and was at a loss to explain what led him to collecting rolls for player pianos. I did get to talk to him about his connection to the Paris Opera.
Pourrais-je...
Ouais, s'il vous plaît. Asseyez-vous.
Bernard, Monsieur Xavier, speaks a little English and has agreed to be recorded on the podcast, yes?
Yes.
So, Monsieur Xavier, you kindly made us that recording from the piano roll on your player piano.
Ouais.
And I think you were of the same opinion about the music. Cette musique, c'était un peu étrange, n'est-ce pas?
Ben oui, hein, c'est clair, hein. Mais quand vous m'avez dit que cette musique est venue de Palais Garnier, je n'étais pas étonné. Pas du tout.
And why do you say that? Why weren't you surprised when I told you the piano roll came from the gramophone collection from the urns at the Bibliothèque Musée?
C'était because my father, he worked there.
Your father worked there. Votre père travaillait pour le Palais Garnier? Ah bon? Then what did he do?
He was, I would say, pompier. He was a fireman.
And he trained in the lowest cellars?
Oui, il a toujours dit que cet immeuble était hanté.
Okay, the building was haunted, but why did he think that? Did he see something, or...
There were stories from a long time ago.
An old building is going to have stories.
Non, vous me prenez.
Alors, expliquez-le-moi.
The buried voices.
The gramophone recordings in the urns underneath the opera, yes?
Yes, they were buried on the lowest level. Some level as where the firefighters used to train. Long time ago, many generations. Un squelette.
The skeleton.
Was also buried there. My father heard from old builders. They told it to him.
A skeleton buried in the same place as the urns, okay. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Xavier.
Je vous en prie, madame.
Speaking with Monsieur Xavier made me think about how fragile so many material things around us in the world are, like the cylinders themselves. Drop them and they could so easily be shattered, and the secrets on them would have died with them. I didn't quite know what to make of Xavier's information. At first I thought maybe it had to do with Count Philippe de Chagny's mysterious disappearance. That could really be something. This count who may or may not have composed some gorgeous, strange music and might or might not have been dabbling in some kind of experimental sound recording. He had somehow died on the lowest level of the Paris Opera and his corpse was still there. I did backtrack a minute and think that maybe Xavier was pulling my leg. An old story told to firefighters in the 1960s, retold to a child. There's a lot of time passed and a lot of room for error and rumor there. But then I did some research, and the skeleton has been reported in other sources. Someone called Monsieur Faure, an administrator of the Académie Nationale de la Musique, mentioned it, as did a Général de Vacherel, so it's there in the records, if a bit obscure. You'd think this kind of rumor would have been better known to the general public. I'm still not sure what this has to do with the Volta lab cylinder recordings on the piano roll, or Count Philippe, but it's all kind of interesting and weird. And distracts from the day job. Anyway, do you have any thoughts, listeners out there? If you do, you can email us at therealshatteredpodcast@gmail.com. It would be great to hear from you. It could be that some expert out there knows who made the recordings and who composed the music on the piano roll, and maybe where Count Philippe went, for all I know. That music is kind of hypnotic, don't you think?
Do you think he was murdered?
Who? Count Philippe?
Or do you think maybe he faked his death?
I can't see why. He was a wealthy aristocrat.
No evidence of scandal? Sorry, I forgot to turn off the sound.
You seem to get a lot of calls from that number.
Yeah.
You ever gonna answer it? Or maybe get another ringtone?
The Shattered podcast is hosted by Nemo and Dr. Phil Donan, with theme music by Katie Seaton, and is a Lesser of Two Evils production 2022.